Eastern shore of Maryland, spring of 1806. The wind, blowing from Chesapeake Bay, carried the scent of salt and promise. But for Hannah, it carried only memory. Memory of when she was 7 years old and watched her mother sold south. Memory of when she gave birth to her first child and the master smiled, calculating future profit. Memory of every lash, every "yes, sir," every night she prayed for a miracle that never came. Until that April night. Hannah was approximately 35 years old. No one recorded birthdays of enslaved people with precision. Her body carried the marks of plantation, scarred back, hands calloused from tobacco, eyes that had learned to look down. But inside her, something never bowed. Plantation was an empire. More than 1,000 acres of land, dozens of enslaved black people, a profit machine lubricated with blood and sweat. The owner, Edward Lloyd IV, was one of the richest men in Maryland. His wealth was measured in human beings. Hannah had worked the fields since she was 6. She knew every inch of that land, the tobacco fields where the sun burned skin until it broke open, the barn where they kept the whips, the quarters where 7 people slept in space smaller than a horse stable. But Hannah also knew something the Lloyds could never imagine. She could read. A crime, a deadly secret. She learned from a white boy who played near the quarters before he grew up and learned to despise her. She practiced in hiding, scratching letters in the dirt, memorizing words from old newspapers used to wrap provisions. And that's how Hannah read, in March 1806, an advertisement in the Maryland Gazette that would change everything. Delaware, free state, border 40 miles distant. 40 miles. Between slavery and freedom, only the distance a determined person could travel in 3, maybe 4 nights of walking. Hannah looked at the 3 children sleeping, huddled in the quarters. 2 of them hers. The third, daughter of Ruth, who worked beside her in the fields. She looked at Samuel, broad-shouldered man who spoke little, but whose eyes said everything. At Isaac, 16-year-old youth who still dreamed. At Esther, elderly woman whose hands trembled, but whose faith was iron. 7 people, 7 lives that did not belong to themselves. Hannah made the decision thousands of enslaved black people had made before her, knowing the price of failure was death. "We're going," she whispered in the darkness. And on the night of April 12, 1806, they ran. They left at midnight, when the overseer's rounds had ended and the dogs slept chained near the main house. Hannah carried nothing but a stolen knife, a piece of cornbread wrapped in cloth, and the memory of every star pattern her father had taught her before he was sold away. "Follow the drinking gourd," he'd whispered when she was small. "North, always north." The 7 moved like shadows through the tobacco fields. Hannah led, her hand tight around her daughter Celia's wrist. Behind them, Ruth clutching her 6-year-old son Thomas, Samuel carrying the youngest child, 3-year-old Moses, Hannah's baby, on his shoulders, Isaac and Esther bringing up the rear. They wore their work clothes, rough Osnaburg fabric that scratched skin raw, thin against the April chill. No shoes. Enslaved people at were given 1 pair yearly. By spring, most were walking barefoot, feet hardened to leather by necessity. The night was moonless. Hannah had planned it that way. Darkness was their only ally. They reached the woods at the plantation's northern edge within an hour. Here, the calculated risk began. The main road to Delaware ran east, heavily patrolled. Hannah chose the forest route, slower, treacherous, but less watched. The forest floor was a minefield of broken branches that snapped like gunshots, roots that grabbed ankles, thorns that tore skin. Moses whimpered on Samuel's shoulders. Thomas stumbled, fell, bit his lip to keep from crying out. Ruth pulled him up, her face a mask of terror and determination. "How far?" Isaac whispered, his 16-year-old voice cracking. 40 miles, Hannah breathed. 3 nights if we're fast. 4 if we're careful. And if they catch us? Hannah didn't answer. They both knew. Recapture meant whipping, branding, sale to the deep south, or death as an example. The law protected masters who killed rebellious enslaved people during necessary restraint. They walked for 6 hours that first night, covering perhaps 8 miles through dense woodland. Every sound was a threat. An owl's cry became a shout. Wind through leaves became pursuing footsteps. A deer crashing through undergrowth sent them diving into the dirt, hearts hammering. Moses's small hand clamped over his own mouth to stop his sobs. At dawn, they found shelter in a ravine thick with laurel bushes, the ground still damp from recent rain. They huddled together, 7 bodies sharing warmth, too afraid to sleep deeply. Hannah divided the cornbread into 7 pieces, each smaller than a child's palm. Esther prayed silently, her lips moving, her trembling hands clasped. Ruth held Thomas so tight he squirmed. "Mama," Celia whispered, "are we free now?" Hannah looked at her daughter's face, 10 years old, already bearing the weight of comprehension beyond childhood. "Not yet, baby. Not yet." By the second nightfall, Hannah's feet were bleeding. They had spent the day hidden in the ravine, listening to the distant sounds of the plantation waking, the bell that called enslaved people to the fields, the overseer's horse passing on the road, the everyday machinery of human bondage grinding forward. And then, around midday, they heard it. Dogs. The sound was distant but unmistakable, the deep baying of bloodhounds, trained to track human scent, rewarded with meat when they found their prey. Hannah's blood turned to ice. She'd seen what those dogs did to captured runaways. Torn flesh, shredded clothes, terror that never left the eyes. "They know," Samuel said quietly. Of course they knew. 7 people missing from morning roll call. 7 pieces of property vanished. Edward Lloyd IV would have sent riders immediately to neighboring plantations, to the county seat in Easton, to every crossroad and ferry landing between Wye and the Delaware border. The advertisement would already be printed, ready for the Maryland Gazette and Baltimore American. Runaway, 7 Negro slaves, including wench Hannah, aged about 35, Negro man Samuel, breeding wench Ruth and her mulatto boy, 2 Negro girls aged 10 and 3, Negro boy Isaac aged 16, and old wench Esther. $100 reward for their return, dead or alive. Dead or alive. Those words made it legal, made it open season. We move now, Hannah decided, in daylight. The dogs are behind us, which means they're tracking last night's trail. We go perpendicular, east, then cut north again after dark. It was dangerous. Daylight meant exposure, meant any white person who saw them could raise alarm, could claim the reward, could shoot first and collect payment for bodies. But staying meant being trapped when the dogs caught up. They crawled out of the ravine and moved through the forest parallel to the road, using the trees as cover. Every 100 yards, Hannah stopped, listened, calculated. Her mind worked like an abacus. Distance traveled, distance remaining, hours of darkness left, speed of pursuit. Thomas's small legs couldn't keep pace. Samuel lifted him onto his back alongside Moses, carrying both children, his face streaming sweat despite the cool air. They saw their first patrol around 3 in the afternoon. 4 white men on horseback, riding slowly along the road, rifles across their saddles, eyes scanning the tree line. Militia. Local farmers and small landowners who supplemented their income by hunting human beings. $5 per day, plus bonuses for captures. The 7 dropped flat behind a fallen oak, pressing themselves into the earth, barely breathing. One of the horses stopped, its rider standing in his stirrups, looking directly toward their hiding place. Hannah's hand found the stolen knife at her waist. If he came closer, if he found them, she would not let them take the children alive. Better a quick death by her hand than what awaited them. The rider called to his companions. Saw a deer. Thought it was them. Laughter. They're probably 10 miles south by now, hiding in some barn. We'll flush them out by tomorrow. The riders moved on. Hannah released her breath, her entire body shaking. Celia's fingernails had drawn blood on her mother's arm, gripping so tight. They waited 30 minutes before moving again. Every minute felt like an hour. Moses had wet himself in terror, the smell mixed with sweat and earth and fear. By nightfall of the second night they had covered another 12 miles, 20 total, halfway to Delaware, halfway to freedom, but their bodies were failing. Esther's breathing had become labored, rattling in her chest. The old woman, perhaps 60, perhaps 70, her true age lost to a system that didn't record enslaved births, stumbled every few steps. Samuel had to support her, one arm around her waist, while still carrying Moses. Ruth's son Thomas had developed a fever. His small forehead burned when Hannah touched it, his eyes glassy and unfocused. He needed medicine, rest, clean water. He needed things they couldn't provide while running for their lives through wilderness. Isaac, the 16-year-old, had torn his foot open on a sharp rock. He limped grimly, leaving bloody footprints that would make tracking easier if the dogs picked up their trail again. "We have to stop longer," Ruth pleaded. Thomas needs freedom." Hannah cut her off, harsher than she intended. "If we stop, we all die. If we keep moving, we have a chance." It was the mathematics of survival, the brutal calculus that enslaved people had to master, sacrifice certain comfort for possible liberation, risk death to escape living death. They found a creek and followed it north, walking in the water to confuse the dog's scent. The cold shocked their battered feet, numbed them mercifully. Moses clung to Samuel's neck, whimpering softly. Celia held Esther's hand, practically dragging the old woman forward. Around midnight they heard voices. Not behind them, ahead. Hannah raised her fist, the signal to stop, to freeze, to become invisible. They crouched in the creek, water flowing around their legs, listening. Male voices, white, multiple speakers, and then the distinctive sound of a camp being made, wood being gathered, a fire being struck. A patrol camp, directly in their path. Hannah's mind raced. They couldn't go back. The dogs were somewhere behind them. They couldn't go around. The creek was their only cover, and leaving it meant leaving tracks. They couldn't stay. Dawn would expose them. She looked at Samuel. In the darkness, she could barely see his face, but she saw him nod. He understood what she was thinking. They would have to go through, past the patrol camp, in the darkness, in silence. 7 people, including 3 children, 1 sick, 1 elderly, moving through hostile territory within yards of armed men who were hunting them specifically. "Stay in the water," Hannah breathed, so quietly the words were almost just shaped by her lips. Single file, no sound, not one sound. They moved like ghosts through the creek, water muffling their footsteps, darkness their only shield. The patrol camp was 50 yards ahead. Hannah could see the orange glow of firelight through the trees, could hear the men's conversation carrying on the night air. Lloyd's offering extra, $100 for the lot, $50 for the leader if she's brought back breathing. Waste of money keeping that one alive, should just shoot her and save the trouble. Laughter, the sound of a bottle being passed. Hannah's jaw clenched. They were discussing her execution like men discussing the weather, casual, economic. She was not human to them. She was a line item, a problem to be solved, a reward to be collected. The 7 moved closer, 40 yards, 30. Thomas's fever made him delirious. He started to speak, his child's voice rising. "Mama, I'm cold. Mama, I—" Ruth's hand clamped over his mouth, her eyes wide with terror. She held him tight against her chest, swaying slightly, humming almost inaudibly. A lullaby turned into a desperate prayer for silence. 20 yards. They could see the men now, 5 of them, sitting around the fire, rifles stacked nearby, horses tethered at the tree line. Militia, but also professional slave catchers. The kind of men who made their living from human suffering, who knew every trick runaways used, who were very good at their work. One of them stood, stretched, walked toward the creek, toward them. Hannah's hand went to her knife. Samuel shifted Moses to his hip, freeing one arm. Isaac, despite his injured foot, tensed, ready. The man stopped at the creek's edge, 15 feet from where they stood frozen in the water. He unbuttoned his trousers. For 90 seconds that felt like 90 years, they stood absolutely still while the man urinated into the creek upstream from them, whistling tunelessly, completely unaware that 7 human beings he was hunting stood barely visible in the darkness. He finished, buttoned up, turned back to the fire. "Probably halfway to Pennsylvania by now," he called to his companions. "We're wasting time sitting here. Lloyd wants every road watched. We stay till dawn, then sweep south." South. They were expecting Hannah's group to double back, to hide closer to familiar territory. They weren't expecting a run straight through. The 7 waited until the man rejoined the fire, until the conversation resumed, until the moment was right. Then they moved. Step by silent step, they passed the camp. 10 yards away, close enough to hear individual words, to smell tobacco smoke and whiskey, to see faces illuminated by firelight, ordinary faces, men who probably had families, who probably went to church on Sundays, who probably never questioned the morality of hunting other human beings for profit. Moses made a small sound. Samuel's hand covered the child's mouth immediately, but it was enough. One of the horses whinnied. "What spooked them?" A voice from the camp. Footsteps coming toward the creek. Hannah made a decision in a fraction of a second. She stepped out of the creek, deliberately, loudly, 20 yards downstream from the group, away from the camp. "There!" she shouted, her voice high and panicked. "There's someone in the water!" She was creating a diversion, drawing attention to herself, away from the other 6. The patrol erupted into motion. Men grabbed rifles, kicked dirt over the fire, mounted horses. In the chaos, Samuel moved the others deeper into the creek, around a bend, into the concealing darkness of overhanging trees. Hannah ran. She ran upstream, away from her people, away from safety, crashing through the water deliberately, making noise, leaving a trail. Behind her she heard shouts, horses splashing into the creek, the deadly sound of rifles being cocked. "Stop or we shoot!" Hannah didn't stop. She crashed through the water for another 30 yards, then threw herself onto the bank and into the forest, running blind through the darkness, branches tearing her face, roots trying to trip her, her lungs burning. A rifle shot cracked the night. The bullet whined past her head, close enough to feel the air displacement. Another shot. This one hit a tree beside her, bark exploding. She zigzagged, using every evasion technique she'd ever heard whispered in the quarters by people who'd tried to run before, who'd been caught before, who'd shared their knowledge in desperate hope it might save someone else. The horses were faster. She could hear them gaining, could hear the men shouting to each other, coordinating, cutting off escape routes. Hannah's foot caught a root. She went down hard, the air knocked from her lungs, her stolen knife flying from her hand into the darkness. Before she could rise, a horse was above her, a rifle pointed at her face. "Got one," the rider called. 3 more horses surrounded her within seconds. Torches were lit. 5 white faces looked down at her, not with anger but with satisfaction, like hunters who'd bagged a deer. "You're Hannah," one of them said. It wasn't a question. The leader, worth $50 breathing. He dismounted, pulled rope from his saddle. Hannah's mind raced. She'd bought the others time, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15. Enough to get further ahead, to find better cover, to have a chance. But now she was caught. And the penalty for leading a group escape was death. If not immediate, then certainly after being returned to Y Plantation as an example to everyone who ever thought about running. "Where are the others?" The man crouched beside her, rope in hand. Hannah looked at him. Really looked at him. He was young, maybe 25, probably grew up on a small farm, probably never questioned the system he was born into, probably thought he was just doing honest work for honest pay. "There are no others," she said quietly. "I ran alone." The man's hand shot out and cracked across her face. "Lloyd's missing 7. Where are they?" Hannah tasted blood. "I don't know any others. I ran alone." Another blow, then another. Her vision swam, her ears rang, but she kept her mouth shut. because every minute she held their attention was another minute Samuel was leading the others north. They tied her hands behind her back and bound her to a tree at the patrol camp while they debated what to do next. We take her back now, collect the $50. We're supposed to get all 7. Lloyd wants the whole group. She knows where they are. We make her talk. Hannah sat with her back against rough bark, watching them argue over her fate like she was a piece of furniture. Her face throbbed where they'd hit her. Her wrists were already chafing bloody from the rope. But her mind was clear. Samuel had the children. He was strong, smart, determined. He knew the route now. He could get them to Delaware. Maybe not all of them, maybe not easily, but he had a chance. That had to be enough. One of the men approached her with a torch, crouching to her eye level. He was the oldest of the group, perhaps 40, with a weathered face and cold eyes. "I've been doing this work for 15 years, he said conversationally. "I know every trick. I've caught over 200 runaways. You want to know how many kept quiet about their group?" Hannah stared past him, her face expressionless. "None," he continued. "They all talk eventually. It's just a question of how much pain comes first. So you can tell me now, or you can tell me later. Either way, I get my answer and my money." He pulled out a knife, not to threaten, but to clean his fingernails casually, demonstrating his complete control of the situation. "Your children are with that group, aren't they? 2 daughters, I heard, pretty little girls. You know what happens to pretty little Negro girls when they're caught after a run. The law says we can punish runaways however we see fit. And some of my associates here, well, they've been in the wilderness for days. Men get lonely." Hannah's composure cracked. Her eyes snapped to his face, rage and terror flooding through her. The man smiled. "There it is. You do care about them. So tell me, which direction did they go?" Every instinct screamed at Hannah to spit in his face, to curse him, to fight even though fighting was hopeless. But she forced herself to think strategically. If she told them the wrong direction, south instead of north, she'd buy more time. But these men weren't stupid. They'd realize the deception within hours, and their anger would be worse. If she told them nothing, the torture would start, and she didn't know how much pain she could endure before her body betrayed her mind. If she told them the truth, no, that wasn't an option. "I'll make you a deal," Hannah said quietly. The man raised an eyebrow. "You're not in a position to make deals." "I am if you want to collect on all 7 before they reach Delaware. They have hours on you. By dawn, they could be across the border, and your $100 is gone." She had his attention now. The others stopped talking, listening. "I'll take you to them," Hannah said. "I'll lead you right to where they're hiding. But you promise on whatever God you pretend to believe in, that the children aren't harmed. Take them back to Y, but don't hurt them. Tentar novament AR." The man studied her face for a long moment, then laughed, a sound without humor. "You think I'm stupid? You'll lead us in circles, waste our time, give them more distance." "Then you'll never find them," Hannah said. "They know how to hide. They'll hear you coming miles away. You'll spend 3 days combing these woods while they're already living free in Delaware." It was a bluff. Samuel was strong, but he wasn't a tracker. The children were liabilities, slowing the group, making noise. Without Hannah's leadership, their chances of actually reaching freedom were slim. But these men didn't know that. The oldest man turned to his companions. "What do you think? She's lying. Maybe. But maybe she's desperate enough to bargain. A mother will do anything for her children. We could just beat it out of her." "We could. But that takes time and she might pass out, and then we've lost hours anyway." He turned back to Hannah. "Here's my counteroffer. You lead us to them within 2 hours before dawn breaks, and I'll make sure the children go back to Lloyd unharmed. You waste our time, and when we eventually catch them anyway, I let the boys have their fun with your daughters while you watch. Then we kill you all." The words were delivered without emotion. A business transaction. Hannah felt vomit rise in her throat. These were not men. These were demons in human skin, created by a system that taught them black bodies existed only for white profit and pleasure. "Untie me," she said. "I'll take you to them." They cut the rope, binding her to the tree, but kept her wrists bound behind her back. One of them tied a second rope around her neck like a leash. If she tried to run, they'd strangle her instantly. "Which direction?" the oldest man asked. Hannah looked at the sky. The North Star was visible through the trees, constant and faithful. Her father's voice echoed in memory. "Follow the drinking gourd." She had to make a choice now that would determine whether 7 people lived or died. If she led them north, toward Samuel and the others, she'd be condemning them all. The children would be captured. Samuel would likely be killed, resisting. Ruth, Esther, Isaac, all of them back to Y, or worse, sold south as punishment. But if she led them south or east or anywhere else, the deception would be discovered quickly, and the men's rage would fall on her, then eventually on the others when they were inevitably tracked down. Unless she could lead them somewhere that would delay them long enough for Samuel's group to reach Delaware, somewhere that would occupy their time, exhaust them, maybe even split them up. The great Choptank Swamp lay 3 miles east. Miles of treacherous wetland, quicksand like mud, water moccasins, terrain that could swallow a person. Difficult to navigate in daylight, nearly impossible at night. If she could lead these men into the swamp, claim the group was hiding there, they'd have to dismount, search on foot, waste hours. Some might even get injured or lost, and every hour was another hour for Samuel to move north. It would cost Hannah her life. She knew that. Once they realized she'd lied, they'd kill her. But her life for 6 others, including her children, that was mathematics she could accept. "East," Hannah said firmly. "They're hiding in the wetlands. I told them to wait by the old trapper's cabin near Choptank Swamp." They moved through the darkness, Hannah stumbling ahead of the horses with the rope around her neck, constantly reminding her of her position. Somewhere between human and animal, property being led to betray other property. The men had remounted, using Hannah as a walking guide. Every few minutes one would ride up beside her and press a rifle barrel against her ribs. "You better not be lying to us." Hannah said nothing, just kept walking east. Her bare feet were shredded, leaving bloody prints on the forest floor. Her wrists had lost feeling from the tight rope. Her face throbbed where they'd beaten her, but her mind was calculating distances, time, possibilities. Samuel would have heard the gunshots from her capture. He'd know she'd been taken. He'd know what that meant. And he'd know to keep moving north, to not stop, to not look back. "Get them free," she prayed silently. "Please, God, get them free." After an hour of walking, they reached the edge of Choptank Swamp. Even in darkness, the change in terrain was obvious. Solid ground giving way to spongy earth, the smell of stagnant water and decay, the sound of nocturnal swamp life. "Here?" one of the men asked skeptically. "They're hiding in this?" "There's an old trapper's cabin about a mile in," Hannah said, "on higher ground. They plan to hide there during the day, move again tomorrow night." It was a real cabin, or had been, years ago. Hannah had heard enslaved people talk about it, a relic from when trappers worked these wetlands before most moved west. Whether it still stood, she had no idea. "You two stay with the horses," the oldest man ordered. "The rest of us go in on foot. Keep the rope tied on her. She tries anything, you choke her." They dismounted and entered the swamp. Within minutes, they were struggling. The ground sucked at their boots with every step. Water rose from ankle-deep to knee-deep. Branches seemed to reach out deliberately to snag clothing and scratch faces. "How much further?" one man demanded, his voice strained. "Not far," Hannah lied. She led them deeper. The men's frustration grew with every difficult step. They cursed constantly, at the terrain, at the darkness, at her, but they kept following because the promise of reward was stronger than the discomfort of pursuit. $100. More than most of these men made in 6 months of farming. Enough to buy new tools, pay off debts, feed families through winter, enough to keep hunting human beings through a swamp in the middle of the night. An hour into the swamp, one of the men stepped wrong and sank to his thigh in mud that held him like quicksand. It took the other 10 minutes to pull him free, all of them now covered in black muck, exhausted, angry. "Where the hell is this cabin?" the oldest man snarled, yanking Hannah's rope so hard she fell to her knees in the water. "Close!" Hannah gasped. "Very close!" But she could see in his eyes that doubt was setting in. They'd been walking for 2 hours now, dawn was approaching, and there was no cabin, no sign of other runaways, nothing but endless swamp. The man pulled out his knife. Last chance. Truth. Hannah looked at him, at his rage, his exhaustion, his realization that he'd been deceived. She thought of Celia's face, of Moses's small hand in hers, of the moment she'd decided that 7 people deserved a chance at freedom, even if it cost her everything. "The truth," Hannah said quietly, "is that you're going to hell, and I'm going to heaven because I saved my children." The man's face contorted. He raised the knife. A gunshot cracked through the swamp. The oldest man staggered backward, a red bloom spreading across his shoulder. His knife fell into the dark water. The other 2 men spun, rifles raising, searching for the shooter. Another shot. One of them screamed, clutching his leg, collapsing into the mud. "Ambush!" the remaining man shouted, diving for cover behind a cypress tree, dragging Hannah with him by the rope around her neck. But there was no ambush. There was one shooter, and Hannah recognized the pattern of fire, deliberate, precise, spaced to create panic rather than kill. This was someone who knew how to use a rifle but was rationing ammunition. Isaac, the 16-year-old boy who'd been part of the group, who should have been miles north with Samuel, who'd apparently doubled back, tracked the patrol, and was now attempting a rescue that would almost certainly get him killed. "Show yourself!" the uninjured man screamed into the darkness. "Show yourself, or I kill her!" He pressed his rifle barrel against Hannah's temple. Silence. The swamp held its breath. Then Isaac's young voice called out from somewhere in the darkness. "You kill her. I kill you. Let her go. You can leave." "Like hell," the man muttered. Then louder, "You're one of Lloyd's property. You're Isaac, the boy. There's a reward for you too." "I'm going to count to 3, Isaac called back. 1, the man tightened his grip on Hannah, using her as a shield. 2, Hannah could see the man's calculation playing out in his face. He was outnumbered, or believed he was. His companions were wounded. Dawn was approaching, the swamp was treacherous, and the reward money wasn't worth dying for. 3! "Wait!" the man shouted. "Wait! I'm letting her go, see? I'm cutting the rope." He cut the rope around Hannah's neck with his knife, shoved her forward into the water. She fell face first, came up gasping, mud filling her mouth. "I'm backing out," the man called. "Don't shoot. I'm going." He grabbed his wounded companion, started dragging him through the swamp back the way they'd come. The man with the shoulder wound had already disappeared into the darkness, either following or dying somewhere in the wetlands. Hannah lay in the water, coughing, her wrists still bound, until she heard Isaac moving through the darkness toward her. "Miss Hannah?" He emerged from behind a stand of marsh grass, 16 years old, his foot still bleeding from the rock injury, holding a rifle that must have weighed nearly as much as he did. "Isaac," Hannah breathed, "why did you come back? You should be with Samuel." "Mr. Samuel sent me," Isaac said, cutting the rope around her wrists. "When we heard the shots, he knew they'd captured you. He said you'd try to lead them away, and you'd need help getting back." Hannah's hands came free. She rubbed her wrists, trying to restore circulation. "How far north are they?" "Maybe 10 miles by now. Mr. Samuel, he's moving them fast. Said to tell you he'll get the children to Delaware, even if he has to carry them himself." 10 miles. That meant Samuel's group was 30 miles in. Only 10 more miles to the border. They could make it. They could actually make it if the remaining patrol members didn't regroup, didn't send word to other patrols, didn't cut them off at the Delaware crossings. "The rifle," Hannah said. "Where did you get it?" Isaac looked down, ashamed. "Stole it from one of the horses while the men were chasing you. Took ammunition, too. I'm sorry, Miss Hannah. I know stealing is wrong." Hannah almost laughed. Would have laughed if she had the energy. This boy, this child, apologizing for stealing from men who were hunting them like animals, who would have raped and murdered given the opportunity. They moved through the swamp, back towards solid ground, Hannah leaning on Isaac's shoulder, both of them exhausted beyond measure. Dawn was breaking. Pale grey light filtered through the trees, making the wetlands look even more desolate, a landscape of death and decay, moss hanging like funeral shrouds, water the colour of old blood. They emerged from the swamp near dawn's full light. The horses were still tethered where the patrol had left them. The two men who'd stayed behind nowhere in sight, probably fled when they heard gunshots, prioritizing their lives over the reward money. Hannah looked at the horses, 3 of them already saddled. "Can you ride?" she asked Isaac. "Never been on a horse, Miss Hannah." "You're about to learn." It was a risk. Enslaved people caught riding horses without written permission could be whipped, imprisoned, even killed, depending on the mood of whoever caught them. But they were already fugitives, already condemned. And horses could cover in hours what would take days on foot. Hannah chose the strongest-looking horse, used a fallen log to mount. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. She hadn't ridden since she was a child, sneaking rides on workhorses when the overseers weren't watching. Isaac mounted clumsily, nearly falling twice. The 3rd horse they left tethered. It would slow them down, and someone would find it eventually. "Hold tight to the saddle," Hannah instructed. "Stay low, and if anyone asks, you're taking these horses to a buyer in Dover on your master's orders." Will they believe that? No, but maybe they'll hesitate long enough for us to get past. They rode north through the forest, parallel to the road but concealed by trees. The horses were confused, accustomed to different riders, but they responded to basic commands. The sun climbed higher. Maryland's eastern shore spread before them, farmland, forest, small towns, the whole geography of slavery in spring bloom. Beautiful country built on generations of stolen lives and stolen labor. Around midday, they encountered their first real test, a checkpoint. 2 white men on horseback blocking the northern road, stopping all traffic. Behind them, a wagon with iron cages, a slave catcher's transport for captured runaways. Hannah and Isaac were still in the tree line, not yet visible. Hannah dismounted, signaled Isaac to do the same. "We go around," she whispered. "Wide circle, come back to the road after we're past the checkpoint." But as they watched, another group approached the checkpoint from the south. 4 riders with 3 captured black people walking behind in chains. 2 men and a woman, all in their 20s, all bearing fresh marks of beatings. Hannah's stomach clenched. Other runaways, caught, being transported back or worse. She and Isaac watched from hiding as money changed hands, as the captives were transferred to the cage wagon, as one of them, the woman, screamed and fought until she was knocked unconscious. "We have to help them," Isaac whispered. "We can't," Hannah said, her voice breaking. "Isaac, we can't. We have 2 horses, 1 rifle, and barely any ammunition. There are 6 armed men there. We'd die and save no one." "But Miss Hannah, the way we help them is by getting free, by surviving, by making sure their suffering means something." It was the cruelest mathematics of resistance, watching others fall while you kept running, knowing that every person who made it to freedom was a testimony, a witness, a proof that the system could be defied. But knowing it didn't make it hurt less. They circled wide through the forest, giving the checkpoint nearly a mile of clearance. It took hours. The horses struggled through dense undergrowth. Twice they had to dismount and lead the animals through particularly difficult terrain. By late afternoon, they were north of the checkpoint, back on course, approximately 35 miles from Plantation, 5 miles from Delaware, 5 miles from freedom. But those would be the hardest 5 miles of all. The final 5 miles to Delaware were the most heavily patrolled stretch in Maryland. Every slave owner in the region knew it. Every runaway knew it. The border represented an invisible line where human property transformed into human beings, where Maryland law ended and freedom began. So the border was watched, constantly. Hannah and Isaac approached carefully, using every bit of cover the landscape provided. They'd abandoned the horses an hour earlier, too visible, too risky. Better to go on foot, to be able to hide quickly, to not stand out. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows. They were both beyond exhaustion now, running on something deeper than physical endurance, on will, on desperation, on the fierce human need to be free. "How will we know when we cross?" Isaac asked. "There's a marker stone," Hannah said. "I've heard people talk about it. On the Maryland side it says M, on the Delaware side D. Placed by surveyors years ago. And then we're free?" Just like that? Hannah looked at the boy's face, so young, so hopeful, so innocent despite everything he'd endured. "No," she said honestly. "Then we're in a free state. But we're not safe. Maryland slave catchers cross the border all the time, kidnap free black people, drag them back. The law says we're free in Delaware, but the law doesn't always protect people like us. Then what do? We find the Underground Railroad, people who help runaways. They'll get us further north, to Pennsylvania, to New York, maybe even to Canada, where we're truly beyond reach." They moved through farmland now, staying low, using hedgerows as cover. Twice they had to hide while patrols passed. Once lying flat in a drainage ditch while horses walked within feet of them, once concealing themselves in a barn while men searched the property. The sun was setting when they finally saw it. The marker stone. A weathered granite post, standing at the intersection of two roads, barely 3 feet high, easy to miss if you didn't know to look for it. On the south face, a carved M. On the north face, D. Maryland, Delaware, slavery, freedom. Isaac started forward immediately, but Hannah grabbed his arm. "Wait." She scanned the area carefully. The marker was too obvious, too well known. If she were organizing patrols, she'd watch this exact spot. And sure enough, there, in the tree line 50 yards east, the glint of metal, a rifle barrel catching the fading sunlight. "They're watching the marker," Hannah whispered. "How do we cross?" Hannah studied the terrain. The marker was on open ground, visible from multiple directions. But the actual border wasn't just the marker. It was an invisible line running east-west across the entire landscape. "We cross 100 yards west," Hannah decided. "In the forest, where there's no marker, no obvious crossing point." They backtracked, moved west through the woods, then turned north. Every step felt monumental. Hannah's feet were destroyed, barely able to support her weight. Isaac's injured foot had reopened, leaving a trail of blood, but they kept moving. The sun touched the horizon. In minutes it would be dark, their ally again. They reached what Hannah estimated was the border. No marker here, no indication whatsoever. Just forest on both sides, looking identical. "Is this it?" Isaac whispered. "I think so. I hope so." They crossed. One step, then another. Maryland behind them, Delaware ahead. Hannah waited for something to change, for some feeling of transformation. But there was nothing. Just trees and exhaustion and the constant fear of recapture. "Miss Hannah," Isaac said quietly, "do you think Mr. Samuel and the others made it?" It was the question that had haunted every step of the journey. Samuel, Ruth, Esther, Thomas, Moses, Celia, 6 people she'd left behind when she was captured. 6 people who'd had to continue without her leadership. "I don't know," Hannah said honestly. They walked north through Delaware for another hour before Hannah's body finally gave out. She collapsed near a creek, unable to take another step. Her vision swam. Her legs simply refused to function. Isaac tried to help her up, but he was barely standing himself. "We need to rest," Isaac said. "Just for a little while." "Too dangerous," Hannah managed. "Slave catchers. Miss Hannah, we'll die if we don't rest, and dead people can't be free." The boys' logic was sound. They found a hollow beneath a massive fallen oak, crawled inside, and within seconds both were unconscious. Hannah dreamed of her children, of Celia's face, of Moses's small hand in hers, of the moment she'd been captured and had made the choice to lead the patrol away, buying time with her own freedom. Had it been enough? She woke to Isaac shaking her shoulder gently. "Miss Hannah, someone's coming." Hannah's eyes snapped open. Dawn light filtered through the trees. She'd slept longer than intended, hours, not minutes. Footsteps approached through the forest. Multiple people, voices speaking quietly. Hannah and Isaac pressed themselves deeper into the hollow, barely breathing. The voices grew closer, and then Hannah heard something that made her heart stop. A child's voice. "Mama said to wait by the creek." "Hush now, Thomas. We don't know who might hear." Ruth's voice. Hannah scrambled out of the hollow so fast she nearly knocked Isaac over. "Ruth!" 20 yards away, 6 figures turned toward her voice. Samuel carrying Moses on his shoulders. Ruth holding Thomas's hand. Esther leaning on a walking stick, and Celia, her 10-year-old daughter, whose face transformed from exhaustion to joy in an instant. "Mama!" Celia ran. Hannah caught her, both of them collapsing to the ground, holding each other, crying. The others rushed forward. Moses climbed down from Samuel's shoulders and threw his small arms around Hannah's neck. Ruth was weeping. Esther was praying aloud, thanking God. Samuel stood back, his face showing relief but also wariness, the hypervigilance of someone who'd spent days keeping people alive through hostile territory. "How?" Hannah finally managed. "How did you make it?" "Mr. Samuel," Ruth said. "After they took you, he didn't stop. Didn't rest, carried both children most of the way, found us food, found us hiding places, got us across the border 2 days ago. 2 days. While Hannah had been leading the patrol into the swamp, being captured, escaping, making her own way north, Samuel had been doing exactly what she'd hoped, getting the others to freedom. "We've been searching for you," Samuel said quietly. "We crossed into Delaware, but we couldn't keep going without knowing. So we've been moving along the border, watching for you." "That was dangerous," Hannah said. "So was leading those men into the swamp to save us," Samuel replied. They looked at each other, 2 people who'd carried impossible burdens, made impossible choices, survived against all odds. "Isaac saved me," Hannah said. "Came back alone, faced down the patrol, got me out." All eyes turned to the 16-year-old boy, who suddenly looked embarrassed by the attention. "Just did what needed doing," Isaac muttered. "We're all free?" little Thomas asked, his fever-bright eyes looking up at his mother. "Really free?" Ruth stroked her son's face. "Really free, baby." But Hannah knew better. She knew they weren't truly safe yet. Delaware was legally free, but that didn't mean they were beyond the reach of Maryland slave catchers who crossed borders illegally, who kidnapped free black people, who operated with impunity because the law rarely protected people who looked like them. "We need to keep moving," Hannah said. "North, to the Underground Railroad stations. There are Quaker families who help runaways. They'll hide us, feed us, get us further north." "How far?" Esther asked, her elderly voice thin with exhaustion. "As far as we need to go," Hannah replied. "Pennsylvania at minimum, maybe New York, maybe Canada." "Canada," Moses repeated, trying out the unfamiliar word. "Is that far?" Samuel lifted the 3-year-old back onto his shoulders. "Very far, little man, but we'll get there, all of us." They traveled by night, hiding by day, moving like ghosts through the Delaware countryside. The Underground Railroad was not actually a railroad. It was a network of safe houses, sympathetic families, secret routes, and coded messages. Conductors who risked their own freedom to help others find theirs. On their 3rd night in Delaware, they made contact. A Quaker farmer named Elijah Morris found them sleeping in his barn. Instead of calling authorities, he brought food, water, and information. "Thee is not safe here," he said quietly, using the traditional Quaker speech. "Maryland men cross regularly looking for runaways. I can shelter thee for 1 night, but then thee must move north." He fed them properly for the first time in a week. Bread, cheese, salted meat, milk for the children. Moses ate until he was sick. Thomas's fever had finally broken, though he was weak and thin. "There's a station 15 miles north," Morris told Hannah. "A family named Garrett, Thomas Garrett. He's helped hundreds reach freedom. I'll give thee a map, supplies for the journey. Why do you help us? Hannah asked. You could be fined, imprisoned, even killed for harboring runaways. Morris looked at her steadily. Because thee are not runaways. Thee are human beings exercising thy God-given right to liberty. The sin is not thy escape. The sin is the bondage thee escaped from. That night, in Morris's barn, the 7 people who'd survived together held a quiet moment of reflection. Samuel spoke first. We lost no one. 7 left. Why? 7 made it to Delaware. Because of Miss Hannah, Ruth said. She led us. She sacrificed herself so we could escape. And Isaac came back for me, Hannah added. And Samuel led you while I was captured. And Esther prayed for us. And Ruth kept Thomas alive through his fever, and the children were braver than children should ever have to be. She looked at each face in the dim lamplight. We survived together. We're free together. Are we, though? Celia asked quietly. Her 10-year-old mind had understood more than Hannah wished. That man said we could still be taken back. Hannah pulled her daughter close. That's why we keep going north, until we're so far away that Maryland's laws can't reach us, until we're somewhere we can live without fear. Will that place exist? Celia pressed. Hannah didn't have an answer, because the truth was complicated. The North was freer than the South, but it wasn't free of racism, wasn't free of discrimination, wasn't free of danger for black people. Free states still had laws that restricted where black people could live, work, vote. Mobs still attacked black neighborhoods. Slave catchers still operated across state lines. Freedom wasn't a destination. It was something they'd have to fight for every single day. We'll make it exist, Samuel said, answering when Hannah couldn't. We'll build it. We'll work, save money, buy land, create communities. We'll make sure our children have better than we did. Moses, nearly asleep on Samuel's lap, murmured, Tell the story again. About the drinking gourd. Hannah smiled despite her exhaustion. The drinking gourd is the Big Dipper constellation. It points to the North Star. When enslaved people escaped, they'd follow the drinking gourd north to freedom. Your grandfather taught me that when I was little, and now I'm teaching you. So we followed the drinking gourd? Moses asked. We did, baby. We followed it all the way here. The next morning, Morris provided them with new clothes. Not much, but better than the torn, filthy rags they'd been wearing. He gave them food for 3 days, a hand-drawn map, and names of other safe stations along the route to Pennsylvania. One more thing, Morris said, as they prepared to leave. He pulled out a piece of paper and a pencil. Can any of thee write? Hannah raised her hand slowly. That deadly secret, that illegal knowledge. Write thy names, Morris said. I keep a record of everyone I help. Someday, when this evil institution is finally abolished, these records will be testimony. Thy names will be proof that people resisted, that people fought, that people won. Hannah took the pencil with trembling hands. She wrote, Hannah, age about 35, Celia, age 10, Moses, age 3, Samuel, age about 30, Ruth, age about 28, Thomas, age 6, Isaac, age 16, Esther, age unknown. Wait, 8 names. But there were only 7 people. Hannah looked around, confused. Then she realized Esther was gone. Tentar, novamente ar. They found Esther in the barn, sitting on a bale of hay, her breathing labored and irregular. Esther, Hannah knelt beside the old woman. We're leaving. It's time to go. Esther looked at her with eyes that had seen too much, endured too much, survived too much. Child, I ain't going nowhere. What do you mean? We can't leave you. Yes, you can. You have to. Esther's hand, trembling but warm, touched Hannah's face. I'm dying, Hannah, been dying for weeks. Knew it when we started running. My heart's giving out. No, Ruth said, moving forward. No, you can't. We'll rest longer. Ain't no resting, that'll fix this, Esther said gently. And I ain't afraid. I made it to free soil. I'm gonna die free. That's more than I ever thought I'd have. Hannah felt tears streaming down her face. We can't lose you. Not after everything. You ain't losing nothing. I'm giving you something. Time. You'll need to move fast. And I'm slowing you down, but more than that. Esther's voice grew stronger, more urgent. I want to die here. in Delaware, on free ground. I want to be buried as a free woman, not as property. Mr. Morris here, he'll see to it, won't you? Morris nodded, his own eyes wet. I will. I'll give thee a proper burial with thy name on the marker. There, Esther said with satisfaction. See, I'll have a name on my grave. Most folks I knew died nameless, thrown in unmarked pits like trash, but not me. I'll have a name. The children were crying. Moses didn't fully understand, but he sensed the grief in the air. Celia held Thomas's hand tight. Samuel stood with his head bowed. Isaac wiped his eyes roughly, trying to maintain composure. Esther, Hannah whispered, I don't know how to leave you. The same way you led us out of Maryland. You put one foot in front of the other, and you keep going. Esther gripped Hannah's hand with surprising strength. You got 6 people depending on you, living people. They need you more than I do. What do we tell your family, if we ever find them? Tell them I died free. Tell them I died choosing my own path. Tell them— Esther's breath caught. Tell them the old woman they thought was too tired to resist. She ran all the way to freedom. They stayed with her for another hour. Morris brought a chair so Esther could sit more comfortably. Ruth made her tea. The children sang a song they'd learned in the quarters back at Y. And then, as morning sun streamed through the barn windows, Esther looked at Hannah one last time. Go, she said, before I make this harder. Go north. Get those babies somewhere safe. Live. Hannah kissed the old woman's forehead. Thank you for everything, for your faith, your strength, your courage. Thank you for giving me one last adventure, Esther replied with a faint smile. One by one they said goodbye. Samuel clasped her hand. Ruth embraced her. Isaac bowed his head respectfully. The children hugged her gently, and then they left. Hannah looked back once from the barn door. Esther sat in the chair, sunlight illuminating her face, eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. It was the last time Hannah would see her alive. They walked north in silence for the first hour, grief sitting heavy on their shoulders. 6 people now, not 7, already diminished by loss, but still together, still free. Will we have a funeral for her? Celia asked quietly. Mr. Morris will, Hannah said. He'll do right by her, and we'll remember her. We'll tell her story. That's how we honor the dead, by carrying their memory forward. By midday, they'd covered 5 miles. The landscape of Delaware rolled past. Farms, forests, small towns where free black people sometimes lived openly, sometimes in fear, always in precarious balance. They stopped to rest near a creek. Moses was tired, constantly asking to be carried. Thomas's strength was slowly returning, but he still couldn't walk long distances. The group's pace was necessarily slow. How much further to Pennsylvania? Ruth asked. Hannah consulted Morris's map. Maybe 40 miles, 3-4 days if we're careful. And then we're truly safe? Hannah didn't answer immediately. Because she was learning that safety was relative, that freedom came in degrees, that even in the North the shadow of slavery reached forward with long fingers. We'll be safer, she finally said, and we'll keep moving until we find a place where we can breathe. That night, they reached the next station, a small house owned by a free black couple named William and Sarah Johnson. The Johnsons had been born free in Delaware, a rare privilege, and used their freedom to help others. 7 came through 3 days ago, William told them after they'd been fed and given places to sleep. Wait, only 6 of you? We lost one, Hannah said quietly. Old woman named Esther. Her heart gave out. She died free in Mr. Morris's barn. Sarah Johnson crossed herself. May she rest in peace. We'll add her name to our prayers. The Johnsons kept them for 2 days, letting their battered bodies rest, feeding them properly, treating their wounds with care that felt almost foreign after years of brutality. Sarah Johnson was particularly attentive to the children. She washed their hair, treated their cuts and scrapes, gave them clean clothes that actually fit. For the first time in their lives, Moses and Thomas played without fear, running in the Johnsons' small yard, laughing, acting like children instead of property. Celia was different. The 10-year-old had aged years during the escape. She stayed close to Hannah, hypervigilant, flinching at unexpected sounds. The trauma had marked her in ways that rest couldn't heal. On the second night, William Johnson sat with Hannah and Samuel, spreading a larger map across the table. "Pennsylvania is 40 miles north," he said, pointing. "But that's not far enough. Maryland's slave catchers work in Pennsylvania too. You need to get at least to Philadelphia, maybe 150 miles total. And even there, you're not completely safe." "Where are we safe?" Samuel asked. "Canada," William said bluntly. "British territory. Slavery's been abolished there. American law doesn't reach. That's true safety." "How far is Canada?" Hannah asked, though she dreaded the answer. "From here, 600 miles, maybe more. Months of travel, dozens of stations, constant danger. 600 miles. Hannah looked at Moses, barely 3 years old, at Thomas, still recovering from fever, at Ruth, exhausted, at Isaac, young and strong, but traumatized by violence. Could they survive 600 more miles? "There's another option," Sarah Johnson said quietly. "Stay here, in Delaware. Build a life. Yes, there's risk, but there's also community. Free black people live here, work here, raise families here. And wake up every day, wondering if today's the day someone comes to drag us back." Hannah shook her head. "I can't live like that. I won't raise my children like that." "Then you go to Canada," William said, "and we'll help you. But know this, the journey will test you in ways the escape from Maryland didn't. It's longer, harder, with more opportunities to be caught. Many people don't make it." "We'll make it," Samuel said with quiet certainty. "We've come this far together. We'll go the rest of the way." That night, Hannah couldn't sleep. She sat in the Johnsons' kitchen, staring at the map by candlelight, tracing the route north with her finger. Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, Canada, each state a step further from slavery, each mile a testament to resistance. Celia found her there, the girl unable to sleep either. "Mama, are we going to Canada?" "Yes, baby." "Will it be hard?" Hannah pulled her daughter close. "Yes, but we can do hard things. We already have." "I miss Esther," Celia whispered. "Me too. Do you think she's with God now?" Hannah thought about the old woman's face in the sunlight, peaceful and determined. "Yes, I think she's exactly where she wanted to be, free and at peace, and watching over us." They left the Johnsons before dawn on the third day, supplied with food, warmer clothes, and detailed instructions for reaching the next station in Pennsylvania. "One more thing," William said as they prepared to depart. He pressed something into Hannah's hand. Coins, actual money. "It's not much, but you'll need it. For food, for bribes, for emergencies." "We can't accept," Hannah started. "You can and you will. That's how the railroad works. Each station gives what they can, so the passengers can make it to the next stop." William smiled. "Someday, when you're settled and safe, you'll help someone else the same way." They crossed into Pennsylvania on a gray morning, rain falling steadily, turning the roads to mud. There was no marker this time, no dramatic moment, just a gradual transition from one state to another, from one degree of freedom to a slightly greater degree. But Hannah felt it anyway. A lightening, a lessening of fear. Not safety, not yet, but progress. They were now 100 miles from Plantation, 100 miles from Edward Lloyd IV and his empire of enslaved people, 100 miles from the quarters, the whips, the endless fields of tobacco. Pennsylvania brought new challenges. The network of stations was less dense here, the distances between safe houses greater. They traveled sometimes 2, even 3 days without contact, surviving on what they carried, sleeping in forests and abandoned buildings, always watching for patrols. The Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 was federal law, meaning slave catchers could legally operate in Pennsylvania. Professional hunters made good money tracking runaways who thought they'd reached safety, dragging them back south in chains. 3 weeks into Pennsylvania, they had their closest call since the swamp. They were walking a rural road at dusk. Risky, but the alternative was dense forest that would have taken twice as long to navigate. when they heard horses behind them. "Off the road!" Hannah hissed. But there was nowhere to go. Open farmland on both sides, no trees, no cover, 6 black people on a road in Pennsylvania, clearly traveling, clearly without white supervision. The riders approached, 3 men, well armed, eyes scanning the group with predatory assessment. "Where are you heading?" the lead rider asked. Hannah made a split-second decision. "Philadelphia, sir. We're free people going to find work." "Free people," the man repeated, his tone making clear his skepticism. "You have papers?" "Papers. Free papers. The documents that proved legal freedom, without which any black person in America could be assumed to be escaped property. We lost them in a fire," Hannah lied smoothly. "Our home burned, everything lost. We're traveling to Philadelphia to get replacements from the clerk's office." It was a plausible story, barely. Fire was common. Records were often destroyed. The process of obtaining replacement papers was real, but the man wasn't buying it. "Funny thing," he said, pulling a folded paper from his coat. "I've got a notice here, looking for 7 escaped slaves from Maryland. 1 old woman, 2 young women, 2 men, 3 children. Your group fits that description pretty well." "7," Hannah said quickly. "The notice says 7. There's 6 of us. Maybe 1 died along the way." Samuel stepped forward, his broad shoulders squared, his voice steady. "Sir, we're free people. We have the right to travel. If you're accusing us of being escaped property, you need proof, and you need to take us before a magistrate. That's the law." It was true, technically. Pennsylvania law required at least a hearing before alleged fugitives could be returned south. But the reality was messier. Many magistrates were sympathetic to slave owners, many hearings were shams, and some slave catchers didn't bother with legal niceties at all. The 3 men exchanged glances, having a silent conversation with their eyes. Then the lead rider said, "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to come with us to Harrisburg. We'll sort this out in front of a magistrate. If you're truly free, you'll be released." "Now, and if we refuse?" Samuel asked, though they both knew the answer. The man's hand moved to his rifle. "Then we assume you're fugitives resisting lawful capture, and we're authorized to use necessary force." They were trapped. 6 people, 3 armed men, open ground with no escape route. Hannah looked at her children. At Moses, barely 3, who'd survived so much already. At Celia, whose childhood had been stolen by slavery and then by the terror of escape. She'd gotten them so far, 120 miles from Maryland, deeper into Pennsylvania than most runaways ever made it, but perhaps not far enough. The men were dismounting, pulling rope from their saddles, rope to bind wrists, to create human chains, to transform free people back into property. And then a voice called out from the farmhouse they'd just passed, "What's the commotion here?" An older white man emerged, walking with a cane, his face weathered by decades of outdoor work. The 3 slave catchers turned to face him. "None of your concern, old man. Official business." "This is my land," the farmer said mildly, "which makes it my concern." He looked at Hannah's group, his eyes sharp, despite his age. "These people bothering you?" It was a test. Hannah understood immediately. The farmer was giving her an opportunity to signal, to indicate whether she needed help or not. "Yes, sir," Hannah said carefully. "These men are trying to detain us. We're free people traveling to Philadelphia. We've done nothing wrong." The farmer nodded slowly. Then he said something that changed everything. "I'm a friend, a Quaker, and I believe these people are telling the truth." The lead slave catcher's face darkened. "You're interfering with lawful capture. I'm protecting free people on my property from kidnapping. There's a difference." The farmer raised his voice. "John! Elias! Come out here!" 2 younger men, the farmer's sons, presumably, emerged from the barn, both carrying rifles. The balance had shifted. 3 slave catchers versus 3 armed Quakers and 6 desperate fugitives. The mathematics of violence had changed. The standoff lasted 30 seconds that felt like 30 years. 3 slave catchers weighing $100 reward against the possibility of getting shot by Quaker farmers. 3 Quakers who preached non-violence but held rifles steady, their commitment to protecting human freedom stronger than their commitment to pacifism. And 6 formerly enslaved people standing between 2 Americas, one that saw them as property, one that saw them as human beings. The lead slave catcher broke first. "This isn't over," he said, mounting his horse. "We'll be back with a warrant, with a magistrate, with the law." "Then bring the law," the farmer said calmly. "We'll wait." The 3 men rode away, disappearing down the road toward Harrisburg, their anger visible in every movement. As soon as they were out of sight, the farmer lowered his rifle. "Quickly now. Inside. They'll be back within hours, and they won't come alone next time." The farmhouse was simple but warm. The farmer's wife, a woman named Rebecca, immediately began preparing food while her husband explained the situation. "My name is Thomas Whitson. This is my family's farm. We're part of the Underground Railroad network, though we don't advertise it." He looked at Hannah. "You were heading to the next station." "We were," Hannah said, "but now you need to move faster. Those men will return with reinforcements, possibly with a corrupt magistrate who'll sign whatever papers they want. You have maybe 3-4 hours before this farm is surrounded." "We can't travel that fast," Ruth said, looking at the exhausted children. "Thomas can barely walk 10 miles a day. Moses needs to be carried most of the time. Then you don't walk." Whitson stood, moving to a window, scanning the road. "My sons will take you by wagon, hidden compartment under false floorboards. It's a hard ride, cramped, airless, uncomfortable, but it'll get you 30 miles north by morning, to a station near Scranton where you'll be safer." "Why are you helping us?" Isaac asked, the 16-year-old's voice suspicious after so much betrayal. "You could be fined, imprisoned. You could lose everything." Whitson looked at the young man steadily. "Because I've read the Bible, and I've read the Declaration of Independence, and both tell me that all humans are created equal. Because I have children of my own, and I cannot imagine them being treated as property. Because silence in the face of evil is itself evil." He turned to Hannah. "You're the leader of this group?" "I am. You've brought them far. Farther than most people make it. But you're not safe yet. Not in Pennsylvania, not anywhere south of Canada. The law is murky. Enforcement is inconsistent, and men with guns don't always care about legal niceties." He paused. "How far are you willing to go?" "As far as it takes," Hannah said without hesitation. "We don't stop until we're somewhere they can't reach us, until my children can grow up free, truly free, not just legally free." Whitson nodded with approval. "Then you go to Canada. 600 miles from here, more or less. My sons will get you 30 miles tonight. From there, other conductors will move you station by station. It'll take months. It'll test everything you have. But at the end, freedom," Samuel finished. "Real freedom," Whitson agreed. They ate quickly, their last hot meal for days, potentially. Rebecca Whitson packed supplies: bread, dried meat, apples, blankets. She gave Celia a small doll, hand-sewn, the first toy the girl had ever owned. "For the journey," Rebecca said softly, "so you remember that people care about you." As darkness fell, Whitson's sons, John and Elias, both in their 20s, prepared the wagon. The false floor was ingeniously constructed, a space barely 2 feet high, running the length of the wagon bed, covered by boards that appeared solid but could be lifted from inside. "6 people in there?" Ruth asked, her voice uncertain. "It's tight," John admitted, "but it's temporary. A few hours until we're far enough north that you can ride openly." They climbed in one by one, Hannah first, then helping Moses down, Celia next, clutching her new doll. Thomas, Ruth, Isaac, Samuel last, his broad shoulders barely fitting the space. The boards were lowered. Darkness enveloped them, absolute and suffocating. The air was immediately stale, warm, thick. "Can you breathe?" John's voice came from above, muffled. "Yes," Hannah called back, though she wasn't certain how long that would remain true. We'll stop every hour to give you air. Stay quiet no matter what you hear. If we're stopped and searched, make no sound at all. Understand? We understand. The wagon lurched into motion. Hannah felt Moses trembling against her in the darkness. She held him close, whispering comfort, telling him stories about Canada, a place she'd never seen, where snow fell white as cotton, but no one picked cotton, where black people lived free and safe and whole. "Tell me about the drinking gourd," Moses whispered. And so Hannah told the story one more time, about the constellation that pointed north, about following stars to freedom, about brave people who ran toward hope, even when hope seemed impossible. Above them, the wagon rolled north through Pennsylvania darkness. Behind them, somewhere in the distance, slave catchers were gathering reinforcements, preparing to pursue, refusing to let valuable property escape. Ahead of them, 500 miles away, Canada waited, a promised land they might never reach, but they were still moving, still together, still free. Hannah touched the faces of her children in the darkness, memorizing every feature, storing every moment. Whatever came next, capture, death, salvation, they had done something that millions of enslaved people could only dream of. They had run toward freedom, and they had made it farther than anyone had the right to expect. The wagon rolled on through the night, carrying 6 souls north toward an uncertain future, leaving behind a nation built on the bodies of people who looked like them, who suffered like them, who dreamed like them. Leaving behind Maryland, 1806, where a woman named Hannah had made a choice that 7 people, now 6, now always 6 in her heart, because Esther would never be forgotten, would be free or die trying. The wagon wheels turned, north, always north, following the drinking gourd home.